Chapter 15. As dawn broke and the caravan packed up their camp, a thin mist hovered just above the trail. The forest had become denser overnight, with trees leaning in closer to the path, their branches glistening with early morning dew. The wind was still, and every now and then a bird would chirp, but their songs felt soft and almost merged with the tranquility of the morning. Dante shifted the strap on his travel cloak and fell in step behind the captain. Although his legs still throbbed beneath the bandage, the pain had dulled to a bearable ache. Strangely, his body felt lighter today, as if something had been pulled out of him the night before and hadn't come back. This made Dante think about the snake again. He was sure the entire floor was covered with the mat and the tent was sealed tight. He glanced around at the soldiers nearby. There were little chuckles now and then, whispers from those behind him, and he noticed a few soldiers meeting his gaze before quickly looking away. Maybe it was just his imagination or paranoia, but deep down, Dante felt like something was off. He shifted his focus to the captain, whose fierce determination was evident as they rode into day 2. His anxiety eased a bit, knowing she was part of the group. He trusted her more than anyone else here. He wasn't completely convinced he could trust her, but at least she was good at her job. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that she acted a bit odd when they were alone together. The group made their way through the forest without any problems for most of the morning. The wheels of their wagons rolled over the packed dirt, while boots crunched through the damp underbrush. They were surrounded by a sea of green all around them. Dante spent the early hours quietly watching the scene unfold. He wasn't exactly sure what he was looking for, perhaps a change in the air or something out of the ordinary, but everything seemed, well, pretty typical. The soldiers, both familiar faces and new recruits, shared their canteens and travel snacks. Rourke was hanging back by the last wagon when one of the soldiers suggested a more direct path through a rockfall that had made the way a bit tighter. Amidria took the suggestion and thanked him. If anything felt off, it was just how uneventful it all seemed. They paused around noon to take a break near a fallen log that made a perfect bench next to a small stream. A few soldiers entertained themselves by skipping stones, and one guy stripped down to his waist to wash off the sweat from his arms. Amedria stood watch at the edge with her arms crossed. Meanwhile, Dante lingered by his wagon, taking advantage of the break to stretch his leg. It was a relief. He no longer felt pain, which meant the medicine was finally working. He overheard snippets of conversation from nearby, nothing too significant. Rourke was joking with another soldier about a horseshoe game where someone had cheated him out of some gold coins. Another soldier was asking for dried dates, while someone else complained that the forest smelled like a wet dog. But one of Rourke's soldiers was strangely absent. The orc, as big as he was, had seemingly vanished into thin air. No one seemed to worry or even mention where he had gone. Dante hesitated to speak up. Maybe the guy was just off using the bathroom or something. Still, he couldn't shake the thought of how someone could just disappear so easily. That sense of unease lingered with him. That night, they set up camp under a thick canopy of trees. The sky had shifted to a dusky blue-gray, with no stars peeking through. Their fires were small, built with care, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, creating a whispering sound. Dante decided to turn in early, saying he wanted to meditate. In truth, he was just seeking some quiet and stillness. Outside, the camp settled into a familiar evening routine. He could hear footsteps passing by, the clink of a tin cup against a rock, and laughter bubbling up from a group in the corner, brief, light-hearted, and easily forgotten. Occasionally, someone sharpened a knife or stirred a pot. Inside his tent, Dante examined every seam and peered under the mats. He carefully walked around, inspecting the tent as if the night before the servants might have overlooked a snake that had gotten bundled up in the gear. Sitting cross-legged with his hands resting in his lap, he pondered the situation. After a time, he realized he might be overthinking things. He shifted his posture and concentrated again, hoping to connect with a new type of mana, one that was as electrifying as lightning. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. When he finally opened his eyes, he scanned his surroundings. Nothing had changed. No visions appeared, and no sparks danced on his fingertips. A wave of disappointment washed over him.
May I come in, Prince Dante?
A soft voice, almost timid, called out. It was Amedria. Dante glanced toward the tent flap.
Sure.
He replied sharply, still upset from the lack of new abilities. But if he wanted to conjure a simple gentle breeze help, then a fucking raging typhoon of flame is there instead, no problem. She stepped inside, visibly startled to find Dante only in his pants. As she instinctively turned her gaze away, curiosity got the better of her, and she studied him more closely. At first glance, he might look like a well-built young man, but as she stepped nearer, she saw scars all over his chest and arms. She dropped to one knee, reaching out to examine them, but Dante instinctively swatted her hand away, snapping her back to reality.
I apologize, Your Majesty. I've just never seen scars like these before,
she said, her gaze directed downwards.
Is that all you came for? To gawk at my scars and treat me like some kind of curiosity?
Dante growled, standing up and quickly throwing on a robe.
Of course not, my lord. But I have to say, when I asked to come into your tent, I thought you were a bit more presentable.
Captain Amedria replied, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks.
Why does it matter now? You've already seen me without a shirt. It's my tent, and if I want to walk around in my underwear, I don't see the problem.
Dante replied, crossing his arms.
Anyway, what brings you to my tent at this hour?
She stood up and moved closer to him. Before he could say anything, she leaned in and whispered in his ear.
I think there's someone here who doesn't belong.
What do you mean?
Dante asked, slightly confused.
I took the snake back to my tent after I left yours yesterday. After looking it over and doing some digging, I realized it's not native to this area. It's definitely venomous, and I can't figure out how you're still alive. I suspect someone tried to sneak into your tent while you were meditating yesterday,
Amedria said quietly.
I thought I was just being paranoid, but now it makes sense.
Dante replied, his expression shifting.
Did you have a suspect in mind?
Amedria asked with a serious expression. He paused for a moment, reflecting on the people around. Then he recalled an orc he had seen with Rourke's party, a feeling of unease washing over him.
That orc. There's just something about him that doesn't sit right with me.
Has he done anything to raise your suspicions?
Not really. But my instincts don't trust him at all.
All right. I'll let you be for now. Just let me know if your leg starts to stiffen or if you need more medicine.
I'll be fine.
Dante assured her.
Thanks.
She nodded, but hesitated for a moment before finally leaving. He didn't sleep for hours. The king's study was quiet, a stillness that only stone walls could create, filled with the scent of aged air and dust. Nicholas stood by the fireplace, arms crossed behind his back, watching the embers dance slowly. He hadn't spoken for a solid minute. Behind him, King Hawthorn poured himself a small glass of spiced wine, then turned to face him.
You're not paying attention,
the king said gently.
I am.
Nicholas shot back.
You just don't like what I'm saying.
The king offered a faint smile and stepped closer, presenting the glass to Nicholas, who politely declined, pushing it away. Hawthorn didn't seem offended. He took a sip of the wine himself and motioned toward one of the chairs by the hearth.
I want him to grow,
King Hawthorn stated plainly.
He relies too much on others. He needs to experience hardship, failure, the risks of becoming a real man.
Nicholas walked over to an opposing chair and remained quiet for a moment, rubbing his fingers together.
He's cursed, Your Majesty. He's not growing in normal soil. You need to nurture Dante a little more to ensure he's pushed in the right direction.
which is why I want him to try.
The king replied.
He won't always have you or me around. He has to navigate paths that don't come with someone clearing the way for him.
Nicholas's face was unchanged.
And what if this turns him into someone colder and more sinister? What if he learns to shut off his emotions and ends up fearing himself as much as he fears others? Is that the kind of man or king you want him to become?
Hawthorn stared into the flames for a moment.
If that's the case, perhaps he was never meant to wear the crown.
A moment of silence hung in the air. Nicholas finally moved towards the door.
You respect me, Your Majesty. I know you do, even if I'm not the man I used to be.
Hawthorn looked up at him.
You're not, but it's the man you were, the one who wielded great power that I respect. Honesty. It's still the same man I see before me. You could have easily taken my throne and ruled over the kingdom, the elf territory, and the dwarf territory. But you chose peace.
Nicholas smiled faintly.
I remember who I was, and I know your son could become that too. If he's around long enough to grow into it, I feel it's my duty, even if it's my last job to guide Dante. That's what I believe I must do.
The king didn't stop him as he walked out. The next morning, sunlight broke through the thin fog, and the camp began to wake up slowly. Dante crawled out of his tent, stretching his stiff muscles as he surveyed the clearing. Soldiers were moving about, their voices low. Captain Amedria stood by the supply wagon, her arms crossed tightly and her jaw set. When she spotted Dante, she waved him over.
It's gone,
she said quietly.
What's gone?
He replied, confused. She hesitated, then reached into a saddlebag and pulled out a worn piece of leather.
Our map.
Dante's stomach dropped.
Are you sure it wasn't packed incorrectly?
I've looked through every bag and crate.
She replied.
The route to the elven territory is missing.
He glanced around at the other soldiers. They weren't panicking yet, but their eyes were fixed on Amedria, waiting for her next move. Holding the torn piece of the map between her fingers, she continued,
It could have been stolen, or just misplaced. Either way, we can't afford to stop now.
She turned away, taking a deep breath.
We'll move northeast. Elven paths usually follow the rivers, so we'll stick close to the water. Everyone, stay vigilant and watch each other's backs.
The group gathered itself and set off again. Dante didn't say anything as they rode, but a nagging feeling told him the missing map wasn't just a simple mistake. It felt like they were walking into something ominous. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a shallow gorge. The woods around them grew more alive with sounds, flies buzzing, trees thick with fungus and dark moss. The air felt off, heavy and stale. That's when the stench of rot and decay hit them. One soldier nearly toppled off his horse, retching. Just as they crested the next rise, Amedria signaled for them to halt. Down in the ravine, there was what you might call a settlement, though it was pretty rough-looking. Bone totems dangled from the trees, and there were mud huts huddled together in clusters. The stench of decaying animals filled the air, with some carcasses completely stripped bare and others still gnawed on. But they weren't alone. Figures loomed nearby, large, misshapen creatures with skin like gray mud, bulging yellow eyes, and arms that looked like knotted clubs of muscle and grime. They were trolls. 3 of them shuffled around the huts. One was tearing meat from a goat that was hanging, while another munched on something, and a human hand was still visible in its grip. Suddenly, one of the trolls raised its head, sniffing the air. Amedria muttered a curse.
Fuck. They're probably picking up our scent now.
Dante felt a rush of adrenaline at the thought of having to fight. Maybe he could unleash some of his lightning magic if it came to that. There was really no way to sneak past them.